This peony is not very easy to draw, but it will be very easy to paint on silk. As always, I will start with a schematic sketch. This will be the central part of the flower, which is still gathered into a bud. This is the open part of the bud, and here is the place where the flower is attached to the stem. It's of course not visible, covered with petals, but I think it's important to imagine the structure, the construction of any object I draw. Understanding the construction makes drawing itself very easy. Now I begin again schematically sketching to outline the petals, just to decide a little about their size and their orientation. In the process of refining the pattern, it will change a bit, but I hope that the initial stage is more or less clear. Now I will show in more detail the individual petals from different angles. And this is approximately how the simplest version looks, as if we just took one petal and put it in front of us. I'd like to make the edge so carved and open work today. There's another version with these rather monotonous repeating semicircles, but today I'm in the mood to make the tips of the petals intricately carved. This is roughly what our petal looks like when viewed from the side in the vertical direction, and this is about how it looks horizontally. And this is where the petal is attached, but in this case it's the invisible part. And this is what the visible part looks like. It's always easier to draw when you visualize the petal in space and can trace all the visible and invisible parts of it. And this one, no, a little higher. And this one is as if the same petal were lowered below. I'm drawing from memory. I have looked through and studied many different images of peonies, Chinese, Vietnamese, Japanese, and therefore I will conditionally call my peony Asian. Their main feature is that they are quite complex in pattern and yet very lively, sometimes very lush, sometimes very asymmetrical. And those impressions that I received, I will try to share with you today. Well, now that we've figured out the basic structure of the peony and its individual petals, we can start drawing the intended flower in detail. I'm deviating a little from the original sketch. Please let me know in the comments below if this peony is too complicated for you. Maybe you'd like a lighter version of the peony. Either way, give me your feedback, please. Honestly, it would be great if you would leave comments more often, because the more reactions left on a video, the more often it's offered to viewers, the more views it gets, and thus the more joy it would give me. Maybe you don't know what to write, just tell me what city, what country you are watching me from. Thanks to everyone who responds to this request. It may seem that I pay too much attention to the drawing, but I insist that good silk painting starts with a good design, and when the design is well done, it's much easier to paint it. I'm going to paint today on this tinted crepe, or in other words, crepe de chine. It has a matte finish and looks the same on both sides. And since I haven't worked on it in a long time, I first checked to see how the paint flows on it, cause I don't remember it. And this is what I call fluidity. It's not bad, it's good enough for today's tutorial. Although, if I have washed it in the warm soapy water, the fluidity would have been much better, like this. If suddenly you don't know how to cut silk nicely and evenly, then first I measure the required size, make a small cut in the marked place, and then just stretch the silk in different directions. And then I cut the last threads with scissors, which, it must be said, are blunt. I have already said, but I will repeat that on dense silk, resist doesn't always penetrate to the full depth of the fabric. So I always check the back side. And here I see two questionable spots. It's better to correct this omission right away than to suffer from leaking resist. One time the translator prompted me with the word agonize. It was funny, but I thought that sometimes fighting a poorly applied resist is like agony. To be honest, I don't have a color concept as far, but as I promised, painting will be simple, two colors at most. And let the first color be orange. It will be a little muted on this grayish silk, and it will gain even elegant shade. Of course, the color of the silk can be anything. The two colors you choose to paint can also be absolutely anything. The dyes or paints you use are all the same too. I start with the simplest way, where I wet the edge of the petal with water, and closer to the base I add color. Here's another way. I'm going to tint the whole side with a lot of diluted orange. I'm going to give it a certain color. And the whole other part of the peony I'm just wetting with water. I remove excess moisture, leaving the tips on the petals without color. I painted the base of the petals with light ultramarine. And the darker ultramarine went in. Now my idea is to bring this very petal to the foreground, so I circle it with a blue color, but slightly changing value of it. And I paint the tinted part in the same way as the just watered part. Actually, I could have not tinted half of the flower in light orange, but I find it more interesting, complex and elegant this way. And when we have ultramarine applied everywhere, I would like to accentuate the center part of the peony, and so the unopened part of the peony will be separated from the opened part and will have a more pronounced center. So that way we'll make the peony more three-dimensional. The center will be the darkest, and the paint itself will flow out over the points as much as it needs. And it's time for a little refinement and detailing. Hopefully this image can be called the timeless elegant peony.